Genghis Khan is one of the most prolific leaders and greatest conquerors our world has ever seen, but his reign and success came hand in hand with a lot of gruesome activity. From the mass amounts of people he killed to his extremely horrific practices. On today's top 10 list, I will be covering 10 dark things that Genghis Khan did. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the amount of people he killed. Genghis Khan is known as many things, and one of the things he is known for the most is being absolutely ruthless. It is estimated that throughout his life he is responsible for over 40 million deaths. 40 million! That would have been 11% of the world's population at the time that he lived. That is absolutely insane and totally frightening. If we compare this number to the number of lives that were lost in World War II, it definitely gives us even more perspective on just how large this number really is. World War II is said to have taken the lives of 60 to 80 million people, which was around 3% of the world's population at the time. The actions and decisions of one man took almost as many lives as an entire world war. That is pretty unbelievable. Apparently, because of how many lives he took, the world actually cooled and over 7 million tons of CO2 was removed. Imagine slaying so many people that it has that large of an impact on the global climate. That is just truly unbelievable. In our number 9 spot today, we have his dark childhood. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. Genghis Khan had a really tumultuous childhood and upbringing, which honestly checks out, because how else do you really become that ruthless of a human being? At only 9 years old, his father was killed by an enemy tribe, and shortly after this, his mother was kicked out of the tribe that the family was in, which left her and 6 children on their own, which certainly was not ideal in these times. This meant that the family had to endure a lot of hardships, and they were often left very hungry and left out in the cold. At only 10 years old, Genghis' half-brother refused to share food at one point. This proved to be a fatal mistake because Genghis decided that this was worth killing his own brother over. I'm not sure about you guys, but it seems like this may have been one of the first red flags that really showed exactly what was in store for the rest of his life. In our number 8 spot today, we have the torture techniques. Genghis Khan was obviously extremely successful and was simultaneously the most feared and most triumphant leader at the time. Being as successful as he was is of course quite a feat, but a lot of people had to suffer and endure in order for him to get there. The people of the Mongol Empire were known for their horrific torture techniques that are honestly some of the worst I have ever heard of. One of the more popular ones was the practice of pouring molten silver down the throat and ears of the victim, which I honestly just can't even believe. Apparently, one of Genghis Khan's favorites was to bend the victim's backbone until it snapped. I'm sorry for telling you guys that one, because I wish I could erase that knowledge from my own brain. I think it's suffice to say that there were a lot of really horrible things going on at this time. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Khwarazmian Empire. I am not so sure as to how Iranian people feel towards him now, but they most definitely used to hate Genghis Khan very much, and I absolutely cannot blame them. The Khwarazmian Empire was located in Iran, and it was one of the most powerful empires until Genghis and the Mongol Empire invaded it. Just a few short years after this invasion, the entire empire had been destroyed and taken over by the Mongol Empire, and of course an insane amount of lives were lost in the process. It is estimated that during this takeover, Genghis Khan slaughtered around 3/4 of Iranians. That is absolutely unbelievable and is one of the largest genocides in history. This has of course affected the population of Iranian people for years to come, and it is said that it took 700 years for the population numbers to rise back up to what they were before these brutal killings. In our number 6 spot today, we have revenge. Remember earlier when we were talking about his rough upbringing and how his father died when he was only 9 years old because he was killed by an enemy tribe? Well, of course, Genghis wasn't just about to let that slide, so at 20 years old he decided it was time to get some revenge. Genghis Khan decided that the best way to exterminate exterminate the people in this tribe would be to line them all up and measure them against the pin that was in the middle of the wheel of a wagon. These pins were around 90 centimeters or close to 3 feet high, and anyone who was taller than these pins would be beheaded. This obviously meant that every single person, except except for children, ended up being killed that day. This of course wasn't extremely fair considering the fact that it was very unlikely that any of these people were the ones who actually killed his father, but I suppose it's not exactly like Genghis Khan was known for being an exceptionally reasonable or fair person. In our number 5 spot today we have this marriage strategy. Aside from killing people directly, another way that Genghis Khan gained more power and control was through his daughters. First of all, I certainly would not want to be the person who had to marry one of his daughters because I feel like you would be constantly frightened for your life. Definitely for a good reason though. To start off his plan, Genghis Khan would marry off his daughters to the kings of his allies. These kings would be forced to give up all their other wives in this process. This wasn't because Genghis was against polygamy, but it was to ensure that his daughters would be the only one in line for the throne. After this, he would send these new husbands to fight on the front lines for the Mongolian army. Because of how savage and ruthless this army was, there were a lot of battles, and this basically just ensured that this new husband would be killed in battle, which of course then left the daughters in the direct line to take over the kingdoms. While I definitely have to give credit for this being quite a smart tactic, it's of course exceptionally brutal and really just not the best way to gain power. In our number 4 spot today we have the favorite son-in-law. While most of his daughter's husbands were just a means to power, there was one husband however that was actually very well liked by the family. Tukchar was actually not only loved by his wife, but was Genghis Khan's favorite son-in-law. Unfortunately, he was killed by an archer from Nishapur, which left his widow on a path for vengeance. Genghis Khan sent his troops to Nishapur, where they then proceeded to kill every single person there. There is some debate about exactly how many people were killed, but it is estimated to be somewhere around 1,748,000. Even if it was half of that, that is still an unbelievable amount of people, and it is pretty insane that they just went and ended the lives of every person that they came across, no matter what. The troops were instructed to behead every person in order to make sure that they all passed away from their wounds and to ensure that there would be no survivors, which was at the request of his daughter. The heads would then all be thrown into a pile, which would leave a very gruesome and terrifying pyramid of skulls. In our number 3 spot today we have the nobles. There was a rule during Genghis Khan's reign where people who were nobles couldn't be killed like others were because they did not want to spill noble blood. This could have been a good thing and could have led to some people's lives being spared, but of course that is not the case. Just because you can't spill their blood does not mean that Genghis Khan will not come up with some other creative way to take your life, and this is exactly what he unfortunately did with some Russian nobles. In 1223, the Mongolian army was in Russia and had just won the Battle of the Kalka River. This was cause for the Mongolian army to celebrate, and why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? The generals of the Russian army and other Russian nobles were forced to lay on the ground. After this, a wooden plank was placed on top of them, and on top of that, they placed chairs and tables. This is when the Mongolian army was sat down at these tables for a feast and celebration. Yes, they really celebrated while standing on top of these people, obviously crushing them. This is truly one of the most gruesome things I have ever heard. In our number 2 spot today we have the human shield. One horrifying thing that has actually been seen a few times throughout history is the practice of the human shield. Genghis Khan was most definitely one of the people who used this terrifying tactic, but apparently he was pretty selective about just who he used as a shield. Sometimes enemy soldiers would surrender to his army in hopes of good treatment, and Genghis Khan would usually end up executing them. But there were some soldiers who, if they were super talented or just had the right kind of attitude, would be asked to join the Mongolian army. But when the time came and when he felt like it, he would order his soldiers to take a large amount of the surrendered enemy soldiers and put them on the front lines of a battle. He would have his men prod the surrendered soldiers to fight and protect the other men, and if they did not, they would of course be killed right then and there. The only way they could attempt to survive would be to fight and hope they made it through the battle. In our number 1 spot today we have his death. No one really knows how or what caused it, but in August of 1227, Genghis Khan ended up passing away. Before he died, he explained that he wanted to be buried in a place where no one would ever be able to find his corpse. After he passed away, his body was carried deep into the wilderness by slaves who were accompanied by soldiers. The slaves were ordered to bury his body, but then in order to protect the secrecy of this place, the slaves were then immediately killed by the soldiers and thrown into the grave. Some people believe after this, the soldiers rode their horses over this spot and trees were planted in order to hide it, but some people believe that a river ended up being diverted over the spot so that no one would ever go looking there. After this, the soldiers returned back to camp where they were then killed, as to make sure that no one who knew the exact location of his body was ever able to talk and spill the secret. It's pretty crazy that Genghis Khan was still ordering the killing of others even after his life was over. This is certainly a testament to just how vicious he really was. To this day, his body has still never been found. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Now I'm going to be shouting out a few comments from my video, Top 10 Scientists That Disappeared Without a Trace. Sharanda Williams says, Olivia's always so positive, I love it. Thanks Sharanda, you guys are always so positive to me, and I just think that it's nice that we can share a little bit of positivity together. Riley Y says, Olivia, you're doing a really great job as a host, keep it up. Riley, that is so nice. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You're the best. You're doing a great job as a video watcher. I love that. Kyle Hiley says, great outfit Ollie, you look great and the vid is ace. Thank you. Thanks Kyle, that was super nice of you. Thanks, I'm so glad you enjoyed the video. That was a super fun one to do and it was very, very creepy. Alright guys, that is all the comments I am shouting out for today's comment shout out portion. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye!